This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Bogosity. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Bogosity. Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 7th of November 2016. The podcast that poked you in 44 and pierced you in 52. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me this week we have Daniel Wilcox.
How did I get here?
And Jacob Morris.
Hello.
So before we get started, if I'm sounding a little slow to anyone, it's because there's some crap going around here. Belle brought it from her school. You know what dens of germ warfare elementary schools are, and we've all got it now, so. But anyway, I'll keep soldiering on. If I'm just a little slow, that's why. So anyway, one way or another, in a day or two, our pain will be over, and we'll finally learn which of these morons will be running the country for the next 4 years. I'm sorry, that's a typo. I didn't mean to say running the country. I meant to say ruining the country. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Typos happen, yeah. All right, so we'll go over the balloted candidates one by one. I asked both the listeners and the co-hosts to say who they're supporting for president, so we'll go over those two. And we might as well just start with Hillary. And I don't know what we can say about her that we haven't said a lot already. She's gotten Biggest Bogon Emitter or Idiot Extraordinaire a grand total of 5 times. And one other time she didn't get either award, but we still covered her lying about the email server. She just wasn't named that week. But this is one where I had no one who actually commented that they were supporting her or going to vote for her. So you guys have anything to say about Hillary?
Wonderful public servant.
I've heard that somewhere before.
I got nothing.
It's because our moms told us if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, afraid I'm not as clever as Jacob here.
All right, well, let's move on, because I have a feeling we'll have a few things to say about Donald Trump. Now, I've said this before, I'm kind of amazed that he never got Biggest Bogon Emitter or Idiot Extraordinaire, but it was usually because there was something even more stupid than him jumping up. I mean, it just seemed to be a year for stupid.
So it's a very relative accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's like, I think Hawkeye said something along the lines of, it's very similar to being valedictorian of summer school.
Yeah, something like that. But back in May, even though we didn't give him either of those, we did cover him saying his great quote about the U.S. can never go into default because we can just print the money.
Wait, has he been taking advice from Krugman?
I think so.
Or Bernie Sanders?
Now, we do have a couple of people who said they were supporting Donald Trump. For example, there's Turner Houghton from YouTube who says, quote, "I'm voting for Trump. I don't like Gary Johnson's centrist policies, and I feel like even if he was elected, he would let the liberals walk all over him. Trump wants to put term limits on congressmen," by the way, so does Gary Johnson, "fight corruption, and tackle the immigration problem."
Immigration problem?
Yeah, brown people are coming across the border.
By the way, since this is the last time I can make this joke, probably, this election, I think, could be summed up as being between the lady and the Trump.
Oh, God, I wish I'd thought of that. Well, someone else who is supporting Trump that might surprise you is our very own Lord Hawkeye himself, Tim Dyson.
I'm not surprised in the slightest, but he's voiced his support for like a year or two now, so.
Yeah, so here's Hawkeye.
Hello, boys and girls. Lord Hawkeye here again, and I'm here to make the case to vote for Donald J. Trump. Yep, and I'm going to make the case to everyone here. To the Republicans, well, most of you I don't really have to convince, but for those of you on the Never Trump train, I would ask you to consider why. What's your objection to Donald J. Trump? If your objection has something to do with what the media's told you, I would invite you to remember that this is the same media who has lied and slandered you for who knows how long, so you really think their word can be trusted? I would advise you to look more to Donald Trump himself and to people who have actually worked with him themselves. And I think you'll find his values to be much more in line with yours than you think. And to the Democrats, that's tough, but I'll still make the case anyway. we all know the reason you're voting for Hillary Clinton is because you have some benefit from government that you want to keep going, and you think voting for Hillary Clinton is going to do that. I would ask you to think again about that. Because of this one simple fact. Hillary Clinton wants war. She has said this in no uncertain terms. She wants war. And your country's already in pretty bad financial straits right now. If she wages a war, where's the money for that going to come from? Your government programs, whatever they happen to be, whatever you think whatever she's promising you, whatever you think she's going to give you, it's going to be cut if there's a war. And if it is cut, if you try to make any noise about it, you'll simply be shouted down as unpatriotic. So if you think voting Democrat is going to get you more free stuff, think again, because it isn't. Hillary Clinton wants war, and a welfare state do not fit. So to you, I'd advise you to just bite the bullet, vote for Donald Trump, and maybe clear out some corruption. And if he improves the economy, then the government would be much better able to get you whatever you want. So that's the case I'm going to make to you. Now, to the libertarians who want to vote for Gary Johnson and everything, completely understandable. I have no objection to Gary Johnson. I'm sure he's a great guy. And I'm sure he'd make a very great president if he were to be elected. But I invite you to take a step back and get a broader view of your situation right now. You have, for many years, made a very valiant effort to try to get libertarians elected. And what's always happened? The media has blacked you out, never given you a shot, and completely prevented you from ever getting in. The media has a stranglehold on politics, and it needs to be broken up or you're never going to have a chance. Now, Donald Trump has enough money to fund his own campaign, which means he's not indebted to special interest groups, and he has enough of media presence already that the media can't ignore him. Even as much as they want to, they can't. And if he becomes president, can you just imagine if he was using the internet and other media to completely bypass the mainstream media in order to talk to the people? My God, the media would lose all the power they have, and then after that, oh my God, libertarians would have a far, far more fair shot at politics. But if you want to have any kind of success in politics, the media's monopoly on it needs to get broken up. If you vote for Donald Trump, that can happen. And then after that, I think if any, you'd have far better chances of ever getting elected after that. And Donald Trump is not bad. I mean, he does have a lot of small government policies that I think would pave the way for greater things to come. I think once people got the taste of it, they would be much more open to more libertarian policies once they got a taste of it through Donald Trump. So, to the libertarians, that's the case I'm going to make. Don't believe the stuff the media tells about him. They lie. You know they lie. And that's my case to everybody. Vote Donald Trump. He is such a departure from the norm. If you vote for him, we could finally break this cycle we've been stuck in for so long and maybe get some real, genuine change. He's a non-politician who funds his own campaign, doesn't talk through a political filter. I mean, come on. You can't tell me you're not just a little bit curious. Well, that's my case, so good luck, America. Do the right thing.
I thought that was an interesting point. And, I mean, I will say this. As far as what kind of president Hillary would be, I've got a pretty good mental model of, and it's not good, of course. Trump, I don't really have a good gauge on it. I mean, I don't really see it being good, but I see it being really, really interesting.
So it's the difference between playing Russian roulette with a fully chambered revolver and a half-chambered revolver.
I don't know.
Or maybe some of the chambers are filled with confetti.
There you go. And then we have Brian Jones from YouTube, who, I guess this is support. It's kind of half-hearted, but he says, quote, I'm hoping Trump will do the things he says he will. A simplified 3-tiered tax system will reduce my taxes by over 50%, a 25% reduction to the size of government, give more power to the states, and yeah, I'm gonna say it, hashtag drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. Of course, I wonder how many people realize that drain the swamp was originally a Marxist thing.
Well, they don't believe in property, so I guess they won't mind if we steal their stuff.
But wait, if we reduce taxes, won't that mean everything will collapse and go to chaos?
Well, I mean, if you reduce taxes without reducing spending, then the deficit's just going to go up and up and up.
True.
And we're going to be even deeper in debt. But he continues, quote, I loathe his attitude towards the Fourth Amendment, though. It's painful and something that I won't defend. I do like Johnson. The idea of a carbon tax is unbelievable coming from a libertarian, though. Actually, what Johnson said about a carbon tax was that it, quote, sounds like a good idea in theory, but it wouldn't work in practice. So he's not actually...
Somebody's defensive.
I don't like his take on illegal immigration either, meaning Johnson's take. So I'm guessing he's supporting, Trump building the wall. Overall, I wouldn't be disappointed if he won. So he wouldn't mind a Johnson presidency, but he seems to prefer Trump.
People who are against immigration are economic illiterates. They might think free trade is a good thing, but they don't think free people walking around kind of trade is bad.
I know, that gets me. It's like people say, okay, we'll let free trade, but we got to restrict immigration. So inanimate objects have more rights than human beings.
And, they're like people taking our jobs, but when we have comparative advantage, we're going to be better off if other people take our jobs in the long run.
Right. That's the thing people don't get about the law of comparative advantage. I mean, people think it's like, okay, we have a comparative advantage over other countries, so that makes us good, but it's bad when they have a comparative advantage. No, we benefit when they have the comparative advantage. Because whatever they have the comparative advantage in, we get those goods at a cheaper price, or better quality, or more efficiently, or whatever, and that frees up resources at home to do other things.
Yeah, though I'm also reminded of, and this phrase always puts a bad taste in my mouth when I say it, race realism. We need to all stay separated.
Yeah, I think I covered that in How to Argue for Immigration Restrictions. A lot of it is like, well, you have to keep the race pure, and that's kind of what it is, and that's the direction, like Stefan Molyneux has gone. He really drank the race realism Kool-Aid.
Oh, and don't forget, Trump's also not a free trade guy either. He wants to make deals, saying China's killing us in trade.
Yeah, and he wants, made in America, and wants to stop jobs going overseas and stuff like that.
Did you watch that Paul Joseph Watson video about why Gary sucks? One of the reasons he says, Gary Johnson's for open immigration. That's not libertarian.
What? On what definition?
Well, maybe he's going like Walter Block has said, which I completely don't agree with, but he was saying like, okay, we don't just let people come onto our property, we have private property, so we can stop them coming on, and by the same token, somehow that means we can stop people from coming into the country. But if I own my property, and I want a Mexican to come onto my property to live or do some work or whatever, I should be allowed to do that, and it will be a violation of my property rights to say, no, you can't do that because he didn't fill out 135 years worth of paperwork.
I've had people ask me, like, what if I wanted someone to come onto my property, but they had to come through someone else's property?
Well, that's why you have this little thing called right-of-way. That's one of those non-starters.
Well, I've heard things from political analysts that he might win.
The prediction markets are fairly solid for Hillary.
I know, but the political analyst side things seem to favor Trump, mostly based on the primaries. People were more warm towards Trump during the primaries than people were towards Hillary.
Yeah, so electionbettingodds.com has Hillary with a 74.4% chance of winning. It's gone up 5.1% in the last day. And this is actually broken down state by state. They have people betting on, who will win California, who will win Arizona, etc. And then they do all the electoral college votes based on that. So it seems like Hillary's pretty solid, and I think predicted.org did the same thing.
I know some people here who are going to be pissed.
Yeah, here it is. Predicted.org has Clinton with 307 electoral votes, not counting the 15 toss-ups. So even without considering the toss-ups, she easily has more than the 270 according to Predicted.
Well, I already bought my tickets to Singapore.
Wait, so why not Hong Kong?
More English speakers in Singapore.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're actually native English speakers.
Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level.
Hey everybody, this is Dave of the Superplex Bros, and you're listening to the Bogosity podcast. When you're done, why don't you head over to superplexbros.com. We have all kinds of editorials and reviews on video games and pro wrestling. We're also currently hosting a major project called the Superplex Pokemon League, and we're about to go into our 3rd season. We just had our actual draft, and we're going over all of the teams and their draft picks. So why don't you head on over there, check things out, and if you like, you can even check out the Superplex Brothers podcast, where Matt and I basically bullshit about video games, pro wrestling, or whatever the hell we want. Anyway, until next time, take care.
Now, I was hoping that Ibrahim would join us because he nominated the Idiot Extraordinaire, and there's a lot of Arabic stuff there, but doesn't look like he'll be making it in, but he did post it on YouTube. He said, quote, Gary Johnson for U.S. President, John King of England as Governor of Utah. I have no idea what the second part means, and I was going to ask him, but that's what he posted. Now, we also have Blame the First. He actually made a whole blog post about why he's voted for Johnson. He did the early voting, as I did. Our votes for Johnson are already in there. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, just a few highlights. He says, quote, When I filled in the bubble next to his name and submitted by paper ballot, I did so knowing full well that he would never become the next president. In the end, I would rather vote for someone who's slightly ignorant about geography and willing to admit and apologize for it than for either of the two corporate shill warmongers who know enough about geography to identify which countries to nuke or drone strike. Trump is a shameless billionaire con artist who is willing to say and do anything to pander to the lowest common denominator. Clinton is a professional crooked politician with a shady past of scandals and secrets that only the most die-hard supporter is willing to ignore. In a perfect electoral system, neither of them will be the presidential choice, especially when they're both the most unpopular candidates in American history. And yet, here we are, forced to choose between them.
The most unpopular candidates in history. That's an accomplishment.
Yep. Neither of them have addressed the farcical failure that has been our 40-plus year-long war on drugs. Gary Johnson has. Neither of them have addressed the transparent security theater that has been our ever-growing surveillance state. Gary Johnson has. Neither of them have seriously addressed police brutality, mass incarceration, or other symptoms of our broken criminal justice system. Gary Johnson has, and neither of them have discussed how they would reduce our reckless interventionist foreign policies, with both of them instead boasting of how they would increase it, all the while Gary Johnson has.
But at least they know where Aleppo is.
Yeah. Apparently, something else I was going to ask Ibrahim about, but I don't think it's pronounced Aleppo. I was looking it up, and I think it's more like Halaba or something like that.
Hey, really?
Yeah, but maybe he can confirm that in the comments, so...
People take a lot of what Johnson says out of context. I mean,
Yeah.
they gave him no segue for the discussion of Syria.
Oh, that whole thing was a setup from the start. I mean, they weren't even talking about that. They were talking about, like, domestic policy, and then all of a sudden he says, what about Aleppo? And there's Johnson thinking, what's Aleppo? Is that some government acronym I wasn't aware of or something like that? And so he asked, what's Aleppo? Now notice that if the guy really wanted to talk about that, he wouldn't have said, what about Aleppo? He would have said, what about Syria? And if you look at the Google Trends for mentions in the news media, in the U.S. news media, before that happened, Aleppo was mentioned basically never. It was just like a flat line down there at 0, and then all of a sudden, the Aleppo moment, and then everyone's talking about Aleppo. So, I mean, the whole thing was just disingenuous from the start. If the news media didn't think it was even worth mentioning, and then all of a sudden they're using it against Johnson as this gotcha moment, you know, it's a setup, people. Don't fall for it. Stop watching cable news. That stuff will rot your brain. But Blame the First continues, quote, I'm not voting for him. I'm voting for a belief in a better America, a belief in a better electoral system, a belief in a better political party that isn't any of the two establishment parties beholden to special interests, a belief that a vote against drug prohibition, mass surveillance, perpetual war, mass incarceration, police brutality, and crony capitalism is a vote that matters most. And most importantly, that anyone who believes otherwise is the one in the wrong, not me, and not anyone else sick of the political status quo. And he finishes off with this nice little rant about how a vote for Johnson is not a vote for Trump or Clinton.
As Joss Whedon would say.
Yep. It's like he should watch this little show called Firefly. I think he might find it educational. All right, also supporting Johnson is David R. from YouTube. Quote, I'm voting for Gary Johnson, aside from foreign policy issues, the 5% threshold, and the fact that I live in a non-swing state. There's also this strange feeling I've noticed recently. I've all but convinced myself that Johnson can't win, and yet it's also the only choice I can make that doesn't feel like I'm throwing my vote away. So our co-host, Jonathan Lachey, also wrote an article on why he's supporting Gary Johnson, and we've linked to that in the show notes as well, so go and check that out.
Gary does seem to come off as a centrist more than a libertarian to me.
Yeah.
He's always been more of a center-right kind of, but, he's libertarian, especially by Republican standards, but that's not saying too much on its own.
He's more libertarian than anyone else who's running.
He's more libertarian than his vice president, too.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
He kind of reminds me of, if anyone remembers, John Huntsman.
John Huntsman?
Yeah.
Hunt, hunt, hunt. He's the huntsman.
Oh, God, Freakazoid.
No, who's John Huntsman?
He was, back in Obama-Romney, he was one of the people in running for Republican presidency.
Oh, who remembers those guys?
I remember some of them, but not him.
We blanked on Carly Fiorina's name in the last hangout, so... Yeah. Jill Stein. Now, I made a video where I talked about how the most important issue is to stop all war. And any other differences you might have with a candidate pales to that. I'm for Gary Johnson because he wants to stop the wars. So does Jill Stein. She's an anti-war candidate as well, so she has that going for her. And once again, I've said this pretty much every other presidential election as well, but I would really much rather it to be a race between the Libertarian and Green Party candidates than the Democrat and Republicans, because they just seem to keep running better candidates.
Well, usually run better candidates.
But there's a lot of stuff going on over the past year about the downfall of the Republican Party, so...
One can only hope. If it does, it'll be one down, one to go, as far as I'm concerned. But, I mean, it stands to reason I don't agree with a lot of what Jill Stein stands for, but she is for ending the drug war.
Wi-Fi harms children's brains.
Oh, yeah.
I was pleased to see her come out and say, no, vaccines are good, everyone get vaccinated, but I think the thing that really did it for me was when she was on Stossel. He did a Green Party town hall with her. And she said that sea level rise due to global warming would turn every coastal nuclear power plant into Fukushima.
And her evidence for this is?
Okay, so she doesn't understand global warming, sea level rise, nuclear power, or the Fukushima disaster. I mean, just so much fail embedded into one comment.
Pretty sure Fukushima was caused by a tsunami.
Well, and it wasn't just that. It would have been predicated by an earthquake. And the earthquake had shut down the reactors. So they needed to keep the water pumping while the decay heat went down so they wouldn't melt down. What the tsunami did was the tsunami took out the generators that were keeping it going, because ordinarily it would just be powered by the nuclear reactors. Those were shut down, so you needed the generators to keep them cool. You take out the generators, now there's nothing to keep the water pumping, and so the water boiled away and it melted down.
So, if we give her the benefit of doubt, saying global warming causes sea levels rising, I imagine it would be slow enough for them to shut everything down and get everything powered down.
Yeah, she seems to have this idea that it's just going to be tidal waves coming in, and it's not. It's going to be something like, I think, 2 to 2.5 feet over the next 100 years. So,
Please remind me, which cereal box did she get her PhD from?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just stuff like that made me say no. But still, I would much rather have seen the popular race here be between Stein and Johnson than between Trump and Hillary.
So, who do we get in favor of Jill Stein?
No one. No one actually came forward and say they were voting for her.
No one said they were voting for Hillary either, so obviously they hate women.
Yeah, we're a bunch of sexists here. Well, you might think we're done. We've been through all of the options, haven't we? Nope. There is one more option, and that is no one. How about that? You don't have to vote. You can just skip right over that race and vote for governor or whoever. You don't have to pick a candidate for president.
So I'm abstaining from voting, and for this recording, I'd like to quote an interview with Doug Casey. There are at least 5 reasons not to vote. Number 1. Voting in a political election is unethical. The political process is one of institutionalized coercion and force. If you disapprove of those things, then you shouldn't participate in them, even indirectly. 2.
So can we take these one at a time? Because I have a problem with this.
Okay.
Because if you're voting for a pro-liberty candidate, a candidate that's going to make government smaller and get government out of our lives, even if he doesn't get it all the way out of our lives, how is that coercive?
Or if it's an initiative to say legalize pot.
Yeah, or to say, oh, let's raise taxes, and you vote against it, and your vote helps them vote it down.
Okay, you're right. Let's just scratch that off.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I actually had someone say to me recently that they wouldn't support Johnson because he was a pothead.
Yeah. Well, so's Barry. We got pictures of Barry.
I think Trump's on crack.
On something.
And maybe a little blow.
Wait, isn't that what Clinton was on?
No, it was Obama that said maybe a little blow. Clinton was the one who said he didn't inhale.
I think Bill Clinton's also probably on a little blow of one kind or another.
Well, I mean, we know George W. Bush had done cocaine. So let's just not pretend that a president doing drugs is a new thing, okay?
Okay. Number 2 is actually not a good reason either. Voting compromises your privacy. It gets your name in yet another government computer database.
Well, the registration does.
Okay, maybe it's
Isn't it already on the database?
Yeah.
Yeah, and usually the voter registration rolls is how they determine who to summon for jury duty. They pull it out from the registered voters.
Okay, the next 2 are better. Voting, as well as registering, entails hanging around government offices and dealing with petty bureaucrats.
Not if you vote absentee.
When are they going to do online voting?
Never, hopefully.
Really?
Oh, come on. Can you imagine the security nightmare?
Yeah, you're right. The encryption would be...
Yeah. If you go on to YouTube and type in triangulation and Ron Rivest, Rivest, he's the R in RSA, he's this real big computer security guru. And Triangulation is an interview show where they interview a lot of people. And there was Ron Rivest and one other guy, I forget who it was, but talking about all the issues like that of internet voting and voting machines and all of the problems with those. And why it's just good old paper ballots that are the good thing. I'll see if I can dig that link up, but it's really good.
Okay, so these next 2 are definitely good. Voting encourages politicians. A vote against one candidate, a major and quite understandable, the reason why most people would vote, is always interpreted as a vote for his opponent. And even though you may be voting for the lesser of 2 evils, the lesser of 2 evils is still evil, and amounts to giving the candidate a tacit mandate to impose his will on society.
But again, if you vote for a pro-liberty candidate...
Yeah, I guess he's talking about voting for one of the major politicians.
Yeah, that's the thing I keep telling the people who are telling me to vote for someone who has a chance of winning. It's like, no, this does not tell the other candidate to go further in the right direction. This tells these candidates, we are absolutely, perfectly happy with what you are doing.
Yeah, they're not going to say, oh, gee, all these people thought I was the lesser evil. Now maybe I should reform myself to be more like what they want. They're going to say, wow, look at all of these people who agree with absolutely everything I want to do.
It's not like they're not narcissists or anything.
But if you vote for a pro-liberty candidate, or if you cast a blank ballot in that race, if you don't vote at all, they'll just write it off to apathy. But voting without marking a candidate in that race will send that kind of message.
Okay, last reason.
So far, I'm not convinced of any.
Okay, your vote doesn't count. Politicians like to say it counts because it is to their advantage to get everyone into a busybody mode. But statistically, one vote in scores of millions makes no more difference than a single grain of sand on a beach. That's entirely apart from the fact that officials manifestly do what they want, not what you want, once they are in an office.
As in busybody mode, like everyone's like, oh, this is so important, we can't afford to not do this.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Just clarifying.
But again, this doesn't cover the idea of voting for a pro-liberty candidate for some reason other than him getting elected, which would be things like retaining ballot access. And also when you're talking about more local races and especially local referenda, a lot of times those are close enough that a handful of votes might swing it one way or the other. So yeah, if you're voting for president, And especially if you're not in a swing state, but even if you are in a swing state, it's really doubtful that your one vote is going to make the difference of who wins and who loses. So that one I'll agree with. But there are still other reasons to vote in other races or for other candidates.
I guess I'll add my own reason.
Okay.
I don't think, the political process is the most efficient way to solve our problems. I think on the private side, companies like Uber and Airbnb and Bitcoin have done more to shake things up than voting has done, towards a positive direction.
Despite how people try to demonize them, looking at you, Adam Conover.
But that might be another reason to pay more attention to the local elections, because if you can look around in your local elections and you can find a city councilman or county commissioner or someone who's, if not pro-Uber, then at least not wanting to regulate the life out of Uber, not in the back pocket of the taxi companies, maybe you can help put that guy in power and then they won't have as many barriers.
Maybe I'm just lazy, okay?
Well, that works too.
Basically, the moral is think global, vote local.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. Okay, also, for none of the above, is Wickstar Runner on YouTube, and he gives 2 reasons. He says, quote, "Not supporting any candidate because A, I live in New York, and as such, my vote doesn't count." Now, this is interesting. There's a couple schools of thought on this. One of them says, if you're in a swing state, oh, well, you can't waste your vote on a third party. You need to vote in the real race. If you're in a secure state like New York, that one's going for Hillary. Then you've got the freedom to vote for Gary Johnson or whoever. But this guy's going the other way. It's look, Hillary's going to take New York no matter what I do, so why should I bother? And then B, I don't care if Johnson gets 5% because I'm positive that it won't matter. And what he's talking about is that that's the threshold for federal matching funds for a political party. And if Johnson gets 5%, then the Libertarian Party for the first time will be considered a major party. But he says, quote, "It won't matter since the Republicrats will magically change the threshold for federal funds if a third party meets it. Of course, there shouldn't be federal funding of the parties for elections anyway." But this is one of those things I kind of go back and forth on. Yeah, I don't like government subsidies and I don't like governments giving money to political candidates. On the other hand, because if you fill out your 1040, you have that thing up at the top, do you want $3 to go to the presidential election fund or whatever it is? That's what that money is. It is the one and only case where they actually let us choose whether or not we're going to fund this. So the money that's coming for that is coming from people who specifically said that they wanted their money to go to it.
Giving us a choice that we want to spend our money there? That's absurd.
Let's have more of that. Do you want your money to go to the foreign wars? I'm like, no.
I might even be fine with having these additional taxes if I got to choose whether to,
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a choice of whether to get the money back, but...
Oh, I just have another reason why I'm not voting.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not a fan of Bill Weld.
Yeah, that's true.
And Gary Johnson I don't feel like he balances him out well enough for me to want to vote for him this time around.
I'm kind of getting the impression that maybe there's kind of trouble in paradise going on there, because Weld has been saying some things that Johnson is like, yeah, and he's having to go back on it, and he's saying, yeah, we're disagreeing about these things.
Yeah, I've heard pretty bad things about Weld. Though back in the day, I also heard really bad things about Barr and Root.
Oh, God, don't get me started.
On Root or Barr?
Either one. Yeah, but you see, that's the thing. We're libertarians. We don't just bow down and worship whoever our candidate is. Unlike a couple other parties I could name.
Are you talking about Connecticut for Lieberman?
Yes, of course. That's exactly what I was thinking of. Connecticut for Lieberman? What is that?
That was an actual party.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. Okay, so I do want to cover one item in News of the Bogus about the ever-horrible DMCA that is hopefully one step towards repealing the whole monster. There is now a temporary, I emphasize temporary, exemption to the DMCA that takes the radical position that you can do whatever you like with a device that you bought and paid for.
What?
Really?
Well, now, we've talked about this before. We talked about it with like a John Deere tractor and some of the newer cars that are out and they run on the computers, and people are wanting to go in and make changes to them. The DMCA actually makes that illegal. And it's been a real problem because one of the reasons to do this is for security experts to go through these devices looking for security holes. But they're not allowed to reverse engineer it under the DMCA. So, the Library of Congress had approved this exemption, which lasts for 2 years. They approved it last October of 2015, but delayed it a year. But hopefully, over the next 2 years, people will see what a benefit this is. And you have Andrea Matwishin, professor of law and computer science at Northeastern University, who said, quote, "This is a tremendously important improvement for consumer protection. The Copyright Office has demonstrated that it understands our changed technological reality, that in every aspect of consumers' lives, we rely on code." So, yeah, I mean, you'd be able to get your own device and try to hack it if you want. You also have Kit Walsh, an attorney with the EFF, quote, "There's a universe of security vulnerabilities that the law keeps researchers from figuring out and telling you about, but are nonetheless present in devices you use every day. For the next 2 years, that threat will be lifted for many forms of security research that are really important." And that was also echoed by Josh Corman, one of the co-founders of I Am the Cavalry. That's a security group that has shown things like Johnson & Johnson insulin pumps can be hacked to induce an overdose, or Jeeps could be hacked to allow a hacker on the internet to control the brakes. All of those were discovered technically illegally. Those researchers actually risked being sued under the DMCA. And Corman says, quote, "It is our belief and hope that if we can create a body of evidence for the positive effects this research brings, we can bring about a permanent exemption. When you remove a barrier to disclosure, you avail yourself of the opportunity to fix these things." And hopefully one of the things that will come out of it is that security expert Matthew Green will be able to write a book. Yeah, if you needed any more proof that the DMCA violates the First Amendment.
So he can't write a book about security for cars?
Well, it's called Practical Cryptographic Engineering, and it's not just cars, it's ATM machines, medical devices, all sorts of things.
I imagine it would require reprinting or republishing copyrighted information or something.
Well, no, it would require reverse engineering the devices for testing purposes, which is what the DMCA doesn't allow, but these exemptions will allow. So on this, Cory Doctorow said, quote, "When we prevail, which could take a decade assuming we go as high as the Supreme Court, we will be doing something fundamentally conservative, restoring your despotic dominion over the things you buy and own. On the way, we will be campaigning in the dozens of countries whom the U.S. trade rep has arm-twisted into passing their own versions of the DMCA as a condition of ongoing trade with the U.S. Our argument will be simple and powerful. The DMCA is doomed in the USA, and if they're not going to enforce it, and you do, then your people will be using American technology to get more out of their property, meaning that only American companies will benefit. Suicide pacts are mutual. When America pulls out, you should too." Want to get $5 really quick? Just fire up your mobile device and go to Get5, that's GET numeral 5.bogosity.tv. By using this link to sign in to the Amazon app for the first time, or if it's been more than 12 months, you'll get $5 off your order of $10 or more. So what are you waiting for? Go to Get5.bogosity.tv. Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. And now it's time to keelhaul this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week, it goes to the RIAA and the MPAA who, surprise, surprise, are advocating that some pretty horrible anti-piracy measures be taken by the U.S., measures which could conceivably destroy everything the internet is. And what they're doing is it's called a Special 301 report, which is where they tell the government about threats to various copyright industries, and the government writes up the recommendations. And this year, the MPAA and RIAA identified domain name registrars as possible piracy facilitators. So, when they were trying to take down the Pirate Bay, and so they got like the piratebay.se and the piratebay.this, the piratebay.that. And they also mentioned Cloudflare, and that presumably would also include Akamai, these caching providers where if you've got a popular website, you don't have 20 million people all pounding on it at one time. I mean, you probably visit lots of sites that use Cloudflare, every day or at least every week and don't even realize it, but it's helping keep everything efficient. And
yeah, I used to run this program called NoScript. You'd be amazed how many sites are just kind of there in the background.
I stopped running it because it was like, what's the point? The idea is you get to say specifically which sites you want to run scripts on, but if you've got gibberish.cloudfront.net, how are you supposed to know whether you have to allow that or not? So I just switched over to uBlock Origin, which allows you to do the same sort of thing, only a little more sanely.
Oh, thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, that's a good replacement for both NoScript and AdBlock Plus. So there's this group called the Internet Infrastructure Coalition, or I2 Coalition, made up of all sorts of people, including Google, Amazon, VeriSign, all these big sites who benefit from this and who do domain name registration and things like that. So they submitted a rebuttal this week warning that if the MPAA and RIAA have their way, it would put the entire internet infrastructure at risk. Quote, certain submissions favor an approach to intellectual property and infringement protections that will be harmful to the internet infrastructure marketplace and therefore to the internet itself, as well as the U.S. and global economies. Technologies themselves cannot be bad actors. Further, a number of submissions characterize technologies and those using the technologies using unnecessarily inflammatory language. Both the vilification of technology and misconstruing of the RIAA have one goal in common: forcing internet infrastructure companies to act as intermediaries in intellectual property disputes. And that's actually what's been going on. They've been trying to say, hey, you're doing hosting or domain name registration or whatever for this group, you have to take them down. And they've been coming back and say, well, okay, give us a court order, which is what you're supposed to do. And then they go run to the government, they're helping the pirates!
Oh, God.
And they say, quote, this is not the answer to intellectual property infringement, is not the purpose of the Special 301 process, and proposals to expand the use of these companies as intermediaries are misguided. Creating regulatory and legal hurdles to the industry's progress will not only negatively impact the architecture and viability of the global internet, it will also impact the overall economy, which is dependent on the continued growth of the internet infrastructure industry.
So hopefully this thing won't pass through, right?
Hopefully not.
One can only hope.
So all of that makes the RIAA and the MPAA this week's biggest Bogon emitter. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. And now let's feed cake to this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire!
And just like that, the length of the podcast is doubled. Well, France brought you Let Them Eat Cake. Venezuela brought you We Will Eat Fried Rocks. And now, Egyptian President, I'm going to do my best here, Abd el-Fattah el-Sisi, has said that his refrigerator was empty of everything but water for 10 years.
Wait, what now?
Good for him.
Yeah, quote, well, this is a translation, but I'm a member of the Egyptian people, and for 10 years my refrigerator had nothing in it but water. I don't know if he's claiming to be a breatharian or what. Yeah. But it seems to me if that's all you have in your fridge for 10 years, you're probably better off unplugging it and using the power savings to buy non-perishable food, you know?
Well, he needs someone place to put water.
Gotta have cold water, you know?
Yeah, so all of this is about the continued destruction of the Egyptian economy, basically how socialism has always gone. And he's just been coming under fire from all sorts of people. Let me just read you out this quote and then I'll tell you who it's from. May Allah give you freedom, Mr. President, Dr. Mohammed Morsi, you and all the oppressed, to fill Sisi's fridge and make sure that privileged man doesn't starve. And that was said by President Mohammed Morsi, who was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. So if the Muslim Brotherhood is doing political satire on you...
Yeah, there's your sign.
Here's your sign. But yeah, people aren't buying it, and he's doing this whole, I'm a man of the people, I'm suffering along with you, and somehow I kind of doubt it, but...
They say the same stuff in Venezuela, don't they?
Yeah, and it's pretty much the same thing. He and his predecessors have been running the Egyptian economy into the ground. Inflation in Egypt is 14%. That's where it was in the U.S. in 1979. Food inflation is 14.8%. Electricity prices increased 25 to 40% just in August. But the economy's only growing at a rate of 3.5% a year. They have 12.5% unemployment, a 90% debt to GDP ratio, and to add insult to injury, they're adding in a 13% value-added tax.
Ooh.
That's on top of corporate and personal tax rates of 25% and a 10% sales tax, not to mention a 14% Social Security tax.
Okay, so some of those are lower than my taxes, but still.
Yeah. But they score a 56 on the Index of Economic Freedom, which ranks them number 125 in the world.
Ouch.
Yikes.
Yeah, so Sisi's fridge is basically becoming a meme, and they've got it, it's in Arabic, but it's basically a before and after, and it's reversed to what we're used to seeing. The before is on the right, and the after is on the left, and the before is the fridge, and the after is a safe, alluding to that's where he's putting all of the public funds that he's misappropriating.
And where's he putting all the food he's stashing?
I don't know. There's another one that's a picture, and it's captioned, how Sisi's fridge is doing, and it's an empty refrigerator. You even had one tweet that said, quote, Sisi swore that for 10 years he had nothing except water in his fridge. If he didn't swear, I might have believed him, but once he did, I know it's a lie. So, yeah, but I mean, it does seem to be going the same way as Venezuela, so, you know, hopefully the Egyptians can get this guy out of power and turn it around before it's too late.
Stop voting for socialists.
So all of that makes Egyptian President Abd el-Fattah el-Sisi this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire!
wraps up this Fun with Dirt edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes in the thumbnail, or become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks to my co-hosts Jacob Morris and Daniel Wilcox for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, here's a quote from Ken Hubbard. We'd all like to vote for the best man, but he's never a candidate. The Bogosity Podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Christmas time is coming, and the most classic of Christmas stories is A Christmas Carol. But how much do you know about the original Charles Dickens novella? Have you dismissed it as a children's book with one-dimensional characters amounting to nothing but platitudes and cliches? Maybe your appreciation of the book was even muted by those dry, boring, annotated books they made you read in school. My book, the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, uses both facts and humor to present the book in a way you probably haven't seen it before. Giving praise when deserved and beratement when warranted, this book is put in the perspective of its time and shows a dimensional, multi-layered Ebenezer Scrooge from start to finish. Skepticism, history, and even economics are employed to show the book in relation to today in an easily accessible format. Appreciate the Christmas of your youth all over again. Get the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, available at Amazon and on PDF as well.